As we've shown in our presentation, the US is not our preferred exposure at this point anyway, whether we get a hard landing or soft landing. So I do want to mention that. But I think part of that depends on how persistent the inflation is going to be in the US. So we've seen initially that inflation is starting to soften, but we're not seeing convincing evidence that the wage inflation is starting to soften. So do we then see a resurgence of inflation, once the base effects have sort of worked through? Or do we actually see the Fed having to really keep rates higher for longer or hike again, start to kind of stabilize rates and then hike again to actually really get that inflation situation under control? That, I think, is a big question. Another aspect to think about is, why have we not seen a hard landing this time? And with, extreme increases in rates that we've seen, very, very quick rate cycle from the Fed. And there's two primary reasons for that. The one primary reason would be that most mortgages in the US now are fixed rate mortgages. So 90% of mortgages in the United States are fixed rate. So everybody in the US is still paying mortgage rates based on their pre-hiking cycle rate. So very little of that impact, the transmission mechanism of the Fed hiking rates, has actually been buffered by those fixed rate mortgages. And on top of that, the cash balances that we've seen in the consumer in the US are still elevated and only slowly working through. And those were all the fiscal stimulus checks that the consumer actually got into COVID. So I think until we start seeing repricing of a lot of that mortgage book, and until we start seeing those cash balances working through, we're going to continue to see what most of the macro voices are calling this kind of immaculate disinflation, right? Soft landing, slowly lowering inflation rates. But I would just be cautious in that it's not impossible that eventually comes to an end when all of these kind of buffers have been worked through.